The chair now recognizes himself for 5 minutes. Mr. Oppenheimer and Mr. DeVille, and I'm going to put it in more simplistic terms and give you a little bit of room to run. And I don't care who starts, but can you give the committee a better understanding of the current regulatory environment for money transmitters from an industry perspective?
I think it sort of segues from the last question. The current environment is, I think, difficult for the banks in many ways because there is a lack in some ways of what is a clear guidance on the part of what MSBs have to comply with. So that's a problem from the banks. Another issue is just divorcing the de-risking argument from this, which we've been talking about, is very often at an MSB, we have to extrapolate from banking regulations because oftentimes there are not specific regulations for MSBs. So more clarity there would certainly be helpful as well. I think probably the main point from my perspective at Western Union is the lack of a level playing field in the MSB industry. Mr. Cassara mentioned the registered MSBs. As of yesterday, there were 25,939 registered MSBs. But as you said, I mean, there are countless unregistered MSBs. And both the smaller registered MSBs and certainly the unregistered MSBs frankly, do not get examined. And so there is not a level playing field. Let's forget about Western Union because I'm biased, but there's not a level playing field between them and a PayPal, Zoom, MoneyGram, Remitly, those like us.
Mr. Oppenheimer, anything to add?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. I think that the environment is for registered money services businesses is one that is robust. I think that there's a lot of work in the industry around streamlining the various regulators we have, which I think efforts to do that are welcome. And I think that we are regulated by both state agencies, and then we also obviously register with FinCEN. We're also under the purview of CFPB. So the more streamlining that can happen, partnering between regulators, the states are doing a lot of streamlining between various state agencies, I think is welcome. And I think that the other thing is aligning bank and non-bank regulations, and I mentioned some of that in my written testimony.
By the way, Mr. Oppenheimer, has your company ever had to deal with the issue of de-risking?
We have. When I started the company, in Boise, Idaho, when I came back from Kenya, from Boise originally, I set up a bank account and filled out on the form that I was a money transmitter. It took the bank about 6 months to go through their internal process, but after that point, we had raised about $750,000 in capital to get the business off the ground. We had not processed a single transaction, but they went through the process, saw we were an MSB, and I get a letter in the mail saying, we saw that you're a money transmitter. We're going to be mailing the balance on your account to the registered address. Thanks for being a customer. And those experiences, I think, happen to a lot of money services businesses. Thankfully, I knew about de-risking, and so I've been working to get a redundant bank account. We transferred it over, and now we have multiple bank accounts. But I think the story that we experienced, there's countless stories out there for MSBs that are not able to get bank accounts and unfortunately just have to shut down.
Mr. DeVille, same question. Has Western Union dealt with de-risking?
We have. I mean, as one of the bigger players, it doesn't perhaps affect us as much, but you know, Mr. Cassara said earlier that the way Western Union settles up is like a hawala. Well, aside from our compliance, and I know you didn't mean that, huge compliance program, there is a difference. We require a correspondent bank to settle between us in Denver and our agents overseas, so that's where our de-risking risk comes in. And then for our agents, who are not as big, of course, they certainly face a de-risking risk as well, if you will.
Well, and I'm sorry that I'm picking on these two, but I'm going to stick with it because I'm interested to know if I asked you about the regulatory environment to start with. So now with de-risking, how much does the regulatory environment actually impact de-risking? And I mean, Mr. Oppenheimer or Mr. DeVille, or are there two?
Well, I'll give you an example. Mr. Paul's organization, Oxfam, obviously a very reputable organization, and it's a customer of ours. They have 11 accounts with us. I pulled the numbers, and we had to do 77 investigations on Oxfam last year because of alerts. We knew Oxfam was good, but you can't just put it aside. A regulator's going to come and look and say, why did you not file a SAR? So that's a perspective from the other side. As opposed to us being de-risked, it's our view into perhaps de-risking a good customer like Oxfam. So it's quite expensive to have a high-risk customer, be it an MSB or a charity.
I see my time has expired.